Everyone has an opinion about fat people, lazy, undisciplined, weak, addicted. And the funniest part, most of those opinions come from people who have never once questioned why their body does what it does. They just got lucky. Lucky genetics, lucky hormones, lucky hunger signals. And instead of admitting that, they turned luck into a personality trait and called it discipline. Here's the uncomfortable truth no one wants to say out loud. If willpower actually worked, obesity wouldn't exist. If discipline was the solution, it would have solved the problem by now. And if shame made people healthier, the world would be thin, not sick. But it's not. Because obesity isn't a moral failure, it's a biological one. And the reason that idea makes people angry is because it destroys the one thing they cling to for superiority, the belief that they're better than someone else because they try harder. This book doesn't comfort you, it doesn't flatter you, and it definitely doesn't care about your favorite diet. It does something far more dangerous. It tells the truth. This video is based on the book Enough: Your Health, Your Weight, and What It's Like to Be Free, written by Dr. Ania M. Jastreboff, an endocrinologist and obesity researcher at Yale, with Oprah Winfrey, yes, that Oprah, who spent decades being publicly shamed, privately tortured, and professionally humiliated over her weight. Before we go any further, let's make this clear. This video falls under fair use. It is educational, transformative, and commentary based. We are not replacing the book. If anything, we're giving you a reason to actually read it, instead of pretending you understand obesity because you watched one podcast and skipped dessert once. Now let's talk about why this book matters. Dr. Jastreboff isn't a motivational speaker. She's not a wellness influencer. She doesn't sell detox teas or shame disguised as accountability. She spent nearly 2 decades studying obesity as a disease, running clinical trials, scanning brains, and watching patients do everything right, eat clean, exercise daily, track every calorie, only to fail anyway. Not because they were weak, but because their biology was stronger than their intentions. And Oprah? She's the walking, talking case study of what happens when the entire world decides your body is public property. She had chefs, trainers, money, time, access, and still couldn't win against her weight. So if you think this is about excuses, you already missed the point. This book isn't saying behavior doesn't matter. It's saying behavior is downstream from biology. Your hunger, your cravings, your food noise, that constant mental chatter about what to eat, when to eat, how much you ate, and how much you now need to punish yourself for it. That's not a personality flaw. That's your brain doing exactly what it evolved to do. Protect stored energy at all costs. And the reason this conversation feels threatening is simple. If obesity is a disease, then shame is useless. Then superiority collapses. Then just eat less sounds as stupid as telling a depressed person to just be happy. This book doesn't ask you to feel sorry for anyone. It asks you to stop being ignorant, and by the end of it, you're forced to confront a brutal realization. Most people didn't fail at weight loss. Weight loss failed them. In the next section, we're breaking down the core ideas of this book. Not gently, not politely, but honestly. Because clarity is more respectful than comfort. Welcome to Mindful Reads Hub. Let's get started. The lie you were taught about weight. The biggest lie the world has been telling you isn't just eat less, move more. It's the quiet, insidious whisper that follows you everywhere you go. The one that says your body is a moral barometer and you're failing simply because you lack discipline. That's not science, that's projection. For decades, Western diet culture, and increasingly cultures across the globe, has framed obesity as a character flaw. You're weak, you're undisciplined, you're a glutton. Your bathroom scale becomes a moral scoreboard. But if obesity were just about choices, the epidemic wouldn't be growing, it would be shrinking. Instead, the World Health Organization calls obesity one of the most blatantly visible and underappreciated public health problems in the world. It affects billions and increases the risk of diabetes, heart disease, liver disease, and some cancers. Not because people overate, but because of complex biology that's been ignored for far too long. What Dr. Ania M. Jastreboff, a Yale endocrinologist who literally wrote the science on this, and Oprah Winfrey reveal in Enough is not just a reframing of obesity as a disease, it's a nuclear detonation in the narrative that's haunted every mirror, every diet, every failed July 1st resolution you've ever made. Oprah's own lifelong struggle with privilege, influence, and access proves the case. Money and willpower alone don't conquer biology, especially when your brain is wired to defend fat. Here's the confrontational truth most people will never say. If willpower worked, obesity wouldn't still be a crisis in 2026, and nearly half of US adults are projected to be obese by 2035, even as so-called miracle drugs sweep headlines. Think about that. Nearly half. That's not a coincidence. That's not laziness. That's biology colliding with abundance. Science now shows that obesity doesn't just happen because you eat too much. It's because the brain's appetite circuits are physically different in people with obesity versus people without it. Not because of character, but because of structure and function. Hormones like leptin, ghrelin, and dopamine don't just control hunger, they hijack motivation, reward, and satiety in ways that no amount of discipline can override. Fat cells themselves carry a memory of obesity, epigenetically changed at the DNA level, that pushes your body back toward weight you once had, even after you lose it. So let's get real. When the world tells you obesity is a choice, what it's really saying is, I choose ignorance because it makes me feel superior. But real science doesn't care about feelings, it cares about mechanisms. Two recent discoveries underscore this truth. Scientists just found a natural hormone, FGF19, that triggers fat burning by rewiring energy use, but only when other brain systems are active, hinting at an evolved survival mechanism that refuses to let go of energy stores without consent. Other teams have mapped new neurons in the hypothalamus that directly suppress hunger, the kind of biological switches that aren't about willpower but about wiring. That's why diets don't work long term. It's not because you're weak, it's because the brain and body have goals that aren't aligned with cultural aesthetics. Here's another layer most people refuse to acknowledge. In countries like Japan, where ultra-processed food penetration is lower, obesity rates are far less than in places like the United States, despite similar genetic backgrounds. Environmental exposure matters. And yet, globally, nutrition messaging still thrives on shame, telling someone with inflammation, leptin resistance, and rewired reward networks that they just need more discipline. That's not science, that's cruelty with branding. The mental part, the relentless self-criticism, isn't the cause. It's the symptom of a society that refuses to update its model. People with obesity often describe constant food noise, intrusive thoughts about eating that sap mental energy and self-worth. They try harder, fail again, and conclude they must be defective. But what if that noise is just biology signaling something deeper, like a thermostat in your house that refuses to go below a set point? That's exactly what emerging weight loss medications target, not moral weak points, but the underlying set point your brain defends, the so-called enough point. This is where science gets uncomfortable for traditionalists, because it isn't just medication anymore, it's a biological reality check. Newspapers, hospitals, and health systems across the world are starting to admit what science has long shown. Obesity is influenced by genes, neurons, hormones, and brain circuits, not moral fiber. The key idea here isn't lose weight, it's understand why your body fights weight loss. And the takeaway, the brutal, unavoidable takeaway, is this. You were never failing because you were weak. You were failing because the system was wrong. Key idea, obesity isn't a moral failure. It's a biologically defended condition shaped by the brain, hormones, and environment, and misunderstanding this fuels shame, not solutions. Key takeaway, treating obesity requires confronting biology, not shaming souls. Favorite quote, Obesity is not a question of willpower. It is a biological challenge created by our body's need to survive in an environment we built. That's not a cop-out. It's liberation from a narrative that has harmed millions. Why enough never feels like enough. Most of us walk around convinced that appetite is a light switch. You flip it on when you want food and off when you're full. That sounds neat and easy, like a thermostat. But the truth is uglier, more complex, and absolutely non-negotiable. Your brain doesn't just passively register whether you've eaten enough. It actively defends a fat set point, a level of fat mass your body prefers, even if it's unhealthy. And it does this through circuits, hormones, neurons, and hormones that evolved over millennia for one purpose: survival in an environment of scarcity. That's the biological reality Dr. Ania Jastreboff unpacks, and the part that wrecks a lot of ego when they realize it. Think about that. Your brain has a built-in defense system for your body's energy stores, not just hunger, not just cravings, a defense system. Like your immune system, but for fat. That's why eat less, move more works like a band-aid on an arterial bleed. It ignores the driver of hunger and guards your defended fat mass with ruthless precision. Modern science, not marketing, now shows that the hypothalamus, a small but powerful brain region, literally signals when your body thinks it needs fuel, and it's structurally different in people with overweight or obesity. Cambridge research found that the hypothalamic appetite control center shows measurable differences tied to body mass, suggesting that in people with higher fat mass, the brain's appetite wiring is not just reactive, it's structurally altered. Those aren't moral judgments, those are neural networks. If you think about your last difficult week of dieting, the cravings, the food thoughts, the mental fatigue, that wasn't just weak willpower. That was a hormonal hurricane playing tug of war with your nervous system. Hormones like leptin, released by fat cells, normally tell your brain, we're good, you can stop eating. But when leptin receptors in the brain become insensitive, a condition called leptin resistance, the brain essentially hears nothing, even as your fat cells scream, we are full. That keeps hunger going and metabolism down, fueling weight gain and retention. There's also dopamine and reward circuitry involved, the same networks tied to pleasure, addiction, and motivation. A Berkeley study actually showed that in obesity, the pleasure response to food can diminish over time as neural chemicals decline. That means your brain doesn't get the same reward from eating that it once did, so it pushes you to eat more. It's not lack of self-control, it's neurochemical adaptation that can prevent satiation. This biological complexity is precisely why so many diets fail long-term. And it's not just psychology, it's biology literally reclaiming territory it sees as vital. The Guardian reported that fat cells themselves appear to remember past obesity through epigenetic changes, modifying gene activity that persists even after weight loss. This suggests a biological memory resisting long-term weight reduction. This isn't just Western science. In Japan and South Korea, where ultra-processed food density is lower and cultural eating patterns emphasize balance and natural flavors, obesity rates have historically been much lower than in the US or UK, even among urban populations. That's lifestyle interaction with biology, not moral superiority. And yet, globalization of processed food and sedentary lifestyles is pushing those numbers upward everywhere. So let's call out the elephant in the room. People think hunger is a choice. It's not. Hunger, especially chronic, relentless, biochemical hunger, is a neurological symptom of how your brain processes energy, hormones, and reward signals. It's not a lack of motivation, it's a set point defense mechanism that evolved to protect against starvation, and now fights weight loss with everything it's got because food scarcity used to be the real threat to survival. In real life, you see measurable consequences of this neural defense all over the world. Global obesity rates continue to climb even where education, income, and health awareness are rising because environmental triggers, ultra-processed foods, sedentary lifestyles interact with biology. A Lancet panel is pushing to redefine obesity diagnostics beyond BMI, acknowledging that weight and health are multifactorial: genetics, hormones, brain wiring, not just a number on a scale. And here's the brutal truth that many would rather ignore. Understanding this doesn't make obesity easier to solve. It makes it harder because it forces us to look at biology, medicine, and societal structures instead of blaming the individual. So here's the key idea distilled from all of this. Our brains are not passive observers of appetite. They are active defenders of a biological set point shaped by genetics, hormones, and environment. Hunger isn't failure, it's feedback. And until we treat obesity as a biological system gone awry, we'll keep blaming the wrong enemy. Key idea: hunger and weight gain are driven by complex neurological and hormonal systems that defend a biologically determined set point, not by choice or moral failure. Key takeaway: treating obesity requires acknowledging the brain's active role in energy regulation, a fundamental shift from willpower narratives to biological reality. Favorite quote: your body doesn't fight weight loss because it hates you. It fights it because it's doing exactly what evolution designed it to do. Trapped in your own mind around food. Everyone thinks food is a choice until they're starving in a meeting at 3 p.m., their stomach is growling like an angry beast, and they're asked to just be disciplined. At that point, the idea that you can think your way out of hunger sounds like someone who's never actually been hungry talking to someone who has. There's a reason diets fail, and it's not because people are stupid, lazy, or morally bankrupt. It's because the brain has more control over eating than the willpower muscle anyone likes to brag about. The authors of Enough bluntly expose how food chatter, that constant internal dialogue about when to eat, what to eat, how much you should or shouldn't, isn't just a bad mindset. It's a neurological feedback loop that your brain literally refuses to shut off because it evolved in an environment where food scarcity was the real threat. That part of our biology hasn't been updated, even though our environment has. Deep inside your brain, two forces are fighting a war every time a snack appears. One is hunger, driven by hormones like ghrelin, the infamous hunger hormone released by the stomach that screams "feed me now." And the other is reward, driven by dopamine circuits that make food feel good. These systems aren't passive. They're wired to make you think about food long before you're actually hungry. That's why hunger isn't just a stomach rumble. It's a mental noise, a biological demand. Science now shows that food cravings are not just about eating because you're hungry. They are a separate neurological phenomenon. Hormones, brain reward centers, and even environmental cues like the smell of a bakery or a TV ad can trigger cravings independent of hunger. A review published in a major neuroscience journal highlights that cravings are distinct from appetite, influenced by hormones like ghrelin and leptin, but also by reward systems in the brain. And get this, scientists recently discovered that in conditions of chronic high-fat diets, the pleasure derived from eating actually declines, not because food becomes less tasty, but because the brain's reward circuits stop responding the same way. This means people with obesity might keep eating not for pleasure, but because their brains are compulsively seeking what used to be rewarding, even as the actual pleasure drops. It's like chasing a high that's always been gone. In simple terms, the brain can unlearn enjoyment while amplifying the need to seek food. It's neurobiological hell. This isn't just academic. Real people around the world live this every day. In cultures that still emphasize whole foods, like parts of Japan or rural Mediterranean regions, obesity rates historically stayed low. But as processed, ultra-palatable foods have flooded global markets, and with them brain circuits that evolved for survival in scarcity, now demand constant stimulation, hunger starts to feel like a relentless internal raid on your attention and energy. Here's the critical insight. What the authors call food noise, that ceaseless push-pull in your head, is not a mistake or a character flaw. It's the brain stuck in biological autopilot, endlessly scanning for energy sources because evolution designed it to do exactly that. Our brains are still programmed to survive famine, not feast, yet we live in feasts. That mismatch is the root of mental bargaining with food. It's why you can be full but still crave something sweet or salty, not because you lack willpower, but because your brain's reward and survival circuits are holding negotiations without your permission. And that's where the modern world weaponizes you. Ultra-processed foods are engineered to hit the brain's bliss points, the perfect mix of fat, sugar, and salt that maximizes craving. They didn't evolve to sustain you. They evolved to enslave your appetite. Advertisers know this. Big Food knows this. And yet the messaging still insists that eating is about discipline, not design. In weight science, we sometimes forget the gut-brain axis, the fact that the brain and digestive system are in continuous dialogue via hormones and nerves. When that system goes into overdrive, triggered by poor sleep, high stress, microbiome imbalance, your brain starts demanding more fuel even if you don't need it. Scientists even recently discovered a new appetite hormone called raptin, produced during sleep, that curbs appetite, and when sleep is poor, its levels drop, increasing hunger and food thoughts. That's not psychology, it's biology on the offensive. So when someone tells you just stop thinking about food, they are either clueless or catastrophically naive. They're telling someone to stop a biological signal that evolved over millions of years. It's like telling a thunderstorm to calm down. Real hunger dynamics are messy. They involve hormones, neural circuits, reward pathways, gut signals, stress systems, and even cultural conditioning. And all of that is why so many people describe eating as a mental battlefield, not a choice. Here's what matters most. Understanding food noise changes everything. It changes the conversation from blame to biology. It shows that willpower was never the primary switch. Willpower was always just a light symptom of a much deeper, systemic neural drive. Key idea: real hunger and food craving are not about willpower. They are emergent phenomena from complex interactions between brain reward systems, hormones, and environment that produce relentless internal food noise. Key takeaway: you can't outthink a system you're a part of. Hunger and craving are biological signals, not moral failures. Understanding the underlying mechanisms liberates you from self-blame and opens the door to real solutions rooted in biology and behavior. Favorite quote: "Your cravings aren't weakness. They're signals from a brain wired for survival in a world that no longer exists." Why diets failed and medicine finally works. At some point, the world decided that dieting was the solution to a biological problem. And once that idea took hold, everything else followed. Calorie charts, food pyramids, point systems, detoxes, cleanses, and an entire industry built on the assumption that the human body is a spreadsheet that just needs better inputs. It didn't work. Not once. Not anywhere. That failure isn't a mystery. It's a pattern. The book walks straight into this uncomfortable territory by showing how nearly every traditional weight loss method was built on a false premise, that obesity is caused by bad behavior and therefore corrected by better behavior. But biology never signed that contract. Biology doesn't negotiate with trends, and it certainly doesn't care about your summer body deadline. Historically, weight loss solutions followed cultural fear, not science. Amphetamines were prescribed in the mid-20th century until addiction became impossible to ignore. Low-fat diets dominated the late 20th century, even as obesity rates climbed in parallel. Meal replacements promised control. Bariatric surgery helped some, but only by physically altering the gut, not by fixing the underlying brain signals driving hunger. Each wave came with confidence. Each wave quietly disappeared when the results failed to last. The book makes one thing painfully clear. Most treatments failed because they never addressed the brain. Obesity isn't just stored energy, it's a neurological state. Hunger, satiety, reward, motivation, and impulse control are governed by brain circuits that evolved to prevent starvation, not to maintain visible abs. When weight is lost through restriction alone, those circuits respond exactly as designed. Hunger hormones rise, metabolic rate slows, food obsession intensifies, and the body fights back harder the longer the restriction continues. That's why weight regain isn't relapse, it's biological recoil. For decades, medicine avoided this reality because it was inconvenient. Treating the brain felt controversial, dangerous, ethically uncomfortable, and so the medical establishment defaulted to lifestyle advice that placed responsibility entirely on the patient while ignoring the mechanisms working against them. Then something changed. Researchers studying diabetes medications noticed something strange. Patients weren't just improving blood sugar control, they were eating less without trying. Not white-knuckling, not bargaining, just less. Hunger quieted. Food noise faded. For the first time, people described feeling normal around food, not controlled, not deprived, not obsessed. These medications didn't suppress appetite through brute force. They altered gut-brain signaling, mimicking hormones that tell the brain when enough is enough. GLP-1 receptor agonists didn't introduce discipline. They restored communication between the gut and the brain that had been broken. The book doesn't frame this as a miracle. It frames it as overdue. Globally, this shift is causing friction. In Europe, medical associations are rewriting obesity treatment guidelines. In Asia, where obesity rates are rising rapidly alongside ultra-processed food consumption, researchers are racing to understand how Western food environments collide with genetic susceptibility. In the Middle East, diabetes clinics report unprecedented weight reductions using medications that were never designed for weight loss in the first place. The backlash is predictable. People accuse medicine of cheating, as if biology was a fair game until now, as if using glasses to see or insulin to survive was somehow noble, but correcting disordered hunger signaling crosses a moral line. That argument collapses under scrutiny. No one tells a person with depression to think harder. No one tells someone with asthma to breathe better. But when it comes to weight, society insists suffering is part of the treatment. The book dismantles that cruelty by showing that obesity responds to medical treatment precisely because it is a medical condition. That doesn't mean medication is magic. It means it finally targets the right system. And here's the part that really unsettles people. When hunger quiets, behavior changes effortlessly. Not because people suddenly care more, but because the mental war ends. When biology stops screaming, decision-making improves. Not through discipline, but through relief. That realization forces a reckoning. If the problem was never lack of effort, then decades of shame were not just wrong, they were harmful. The deeper message isn't about pills. It's about humility, about admitting that human biology is more complex than slogans and that moralizing weight has delayed real treatment for generations. The book doesn't celebrate the failure of diets, it autopsies them. And what emerges isn't a rejection of responsibility, it's a redistribution of it. Away from individuals fighting alone and towards systems that finally acknowledge how bodies actually work. Key idea. Traditional diets failed because they targeted behavior while ignoring the brain-based biological systems that regulate hunger, satiety, and weight defense. Key takeaway. Sustainable weight treatment begins when medicine stops moralizing appetite and starts treating obesity as the neurohormonal condition it actually is. Favorite quote, obesity treatment didn't fail because people lacked discipline. It failed because we weren't treating the disease. Stop chasing weight loss, start treating health. You've probably seen the headlines screaming about weight loss drugs like they're the new iPhone. Now a pill will melt your fat, lose 20% of your body weight effortlessly. But if you think that's the real story, you're missing the plot. The deeper truth, the one the authors in Enough quietly pour gasoline on, is much harder for the mainstream to stomach. People aren't failing at weight loss because they're weak. They're failing because the system they've been fed as a solution was always incomplete. History doesn't lie. Diets didn't just fail individuals, they failed entire populations. And when science finally started treating obesity as a chronic metabolic and neurological disease, the conversation flipped. Governments, institutions, and health bodies around the world are finally acknowledging what researchers like Dr. Ania Jastreboff have been saying. Regulating weight isn't about aesthetics, it's about health outcomes. The World Health Organization, WHO, issued its first global guideline recommending GLP-1 therapies, drugs like semaglutide, tirzepatide, and liraglutide, as part of a comprehensive approach to treating obesity as a long-term disease, not a short-term vanity project. But let's be brutally honest, medicine isn't a silver bullet. When the World Health Organization says medication must be part of a holistic, lifelong care plan, they're telling us something most people don't want to hear. You can't outsource your health to a pill alone. Biological treatment must harmonize with behavior, environment, and long-term support. Otherwise, the progress is temporary at best. The guideline explicitly highlights that any prescription must be paired with lifestyle support like nutrition counseling, physical activity, and ongoing care. And here's where the conversation gets messy and fascinating. Research from major clinics like Cleveland Clinic shows that when you compare surgical solutions with these newer medications, surgery still often delivers greater long-term health benefits, especially for people with obesity and diabetes. Longer life expectancy, fewer heart problems, and better metabolic outcomes than medication alone. That's not a knock on medicine. That's a reminder of how powerful metabolic regulation and biology are. But look at how the world is reacting. In 2026, scanning headlines from Reuters and WHO releases, you see a pattern. We're finally treating obesity not as a moral failing, but as a public health challenge requiring comprehensive strategies, medication, policy change, food systems reform, education, and preventive interventions. In the UK, nearly a quarter of general practitioners reported seeing obesity in children as young as 4, highlighting that this isn't a personal problem, it's a societal one, and the reluctance of doctors to talk about it with families because of fear of shame and emotional backlash tells you exactly how stuck we are in outdated narratives that blame people instead of biology and environment. Meanwhile, new developments are reshaping tomorrow's health landscape. There's promising progress on experimental drugs that could rival or even beat current GLP-1 medications, and breakthroughs like gene therapy aimed at long-term metabolic adjustment, not just weekly injections. And in the US, regulators have approved an oral version of a major weight loss drug, potentially widening accessibility in ways that injections couldn't. But don't let the hype fool you. These treatments aren't shortcuts. A study out this month reports nearly half of people discontinue GLP-1 drugs within a year, and many regain weight quickly after stopping. A stark reminder that treatment isn't a cure, it's a long-term strategy. That aligns perfectly with the book's argument that obesity is a chronic condition, not a crisis solved by willpower or a 12-week program. In a way, the global health community is finally admitting what Enough has been trying to get people to understand for years. Obesity is not a battle to be won once. It's a health journey, often lifelong, that must be treated with evidence-based medicine, environmental shifts, and compassionate understanding, not judgment or quick fixes. Here's the real takeaway. Weight loss is not the same as health. The obsession with numbers on a scale has been the biggest detour in obesity science. Guns don't make you safer. Strategic public health measures do. Pills don't make you healthier if the root causes, food environment, socioeconomics, psychological stress, sleep, systemic inflammation aren't addressed in parallel. Real health comes from integrated solutions, medical, social, and behavioral. And that's precisely the revolution the book pushes toward. Stop chasing weight loss. Start optimizing health. Key idea: sustainable treatment of obesity requires shifting the focus from weight loss as a cosmetic goal to health optimization using comprehensive, lifelong, evidence-based strategies that integrate medicine, behavior, and systemic change. Key takeaway: to truly improve health, not just shrink bodies, we must embrace obesity as a chronic disease requiring sustained, multi-layered care, not temporary fixes or shame-based narratives. Favorite quote: weight loss without health is vanity. Treating obesity with science and compassion is wisdom. The future is freedom, not perfection. Most people still think fixing obesity is about fixing yourself, as if change were a personality flaw you could conquer, polish, and discard. That assumption, so embedded in our culture it feels natural, is actually a relic of a time when society hadn't begun to take the biology seriously. But biology always keeps receipts. And what the authors of Enough make clear, backed not just by clinical evidence but by global patterns, is that treating obesity today isn't about perfection. It's about freedom from the endless mental war over food and body that has defined modern life for so many. Around the world, health systems are finally acknowledging what people with obesity have been trying to scream through decades of dieting and self-blame. This isn't a cosmetic issue, it's a biological condition requiring medical care, long-term management, and social support. That's why organizations like the World Health Organization have officially recommended GLP-1 drugs such as semaglutide and tirzepatide as part of a public health strategy, precisely because they help real health outcomes, not just lighter bodies. These drugs have been shown to reduce serious risks like heart attack and stroke in people with obesity, regardless of how much weight they lost. Look at the science. A massive meta-analysis of GLP-1 receptor agonists, medications like Ozempic, Wegovy, and Zepbound, found that in clinical trials they can reduce weight significantly and improve cardiometabolic markers. Semaglutide, for example, often performs best among the class. Yet even as medicine recognizes this, real-world data sometimes paints a messier picture. In clinical practice, average weight loss tends to be lower than in trials, and people often regain weight after stopping the drugs. That's biology's version of a reality check. Which brings us to the human side of this struggle, the part the book talks about but never sugarcoats. Treating obesity is not a one-off transaction, it's a long-term engagement with your own physiology. The idea of enough in the book, that point where your brain finally stops fighting you for more, isn't a destination you reach neatly once. It's a dynamic process shaped by hormones, environment, and genetics. That's why people using GLP-1 medications often describe a profound psychological shift. Food stops dominating thought, binge urges quiet, and energy becomes available for life instead of constant negotiation with appetite. But science and hope are messy when they meet real life. Even as these drugs help millions, they come with trade-offs. Regulators in the UK have issued warnings about a small but serious risk of acute pancreatitis linked to GLP-1 medications. A wake-up call that even promising treatments have risks that must be respected. A broader PubMed meta-analysis confirms that while these medications are effective, they can cause gastrointestinal side effects and rare serious events, meaning careful monitoring and personalized dosing aren't optional, they're essential. At the same time, real-world sentiment around these drugs is complicated. Social media sentiment analyses show mixed feelings, praise for weight loss and relief, but anxiety about cost, side effects, and identity shifts tied to body and self-worth. Some people report profound relief, others grapple with intense side effects or weight return after stopping. That's the lived truth behind headlines of miracle drugs. Meanwhile, global disparities persist. WHO warns that only a fraction of the people who could benefit from these treatments actually have access, not because the drugs don't work, but because production, cost, and health system capacity limit who can receive them. Obesity, which may affect billions by 2030, won't be solved by injections alone. Equitable access is still a major barrier. And yet, despite these challenges, there's evidence of shifting behavior beyond the clinic. Research has found that households using GLP-1 drugs spend less on snack foods and more on fruits and healthier items, suggesting that when biology stops screaming for energy, people actually reorient towards sustainable patterns. That's not just chemistry, it's liberation from the obsession that once ruled every thought about food. Dig deeper, and you begin to see that the story isn't just about weight or even health, it's about narrative change. In Japan, where obesity remains comparatively low, some users pursue GLP-1s for weight anxiety rather than medical need, showing how quickly societal pressures can hijack even effective treatments for cosmetic goals. That's a cautionary tale and a reminder, even as medicine evolves, culture evolves too, and not always in healthy directions. This brings us back to the real message underpinning all the scientific breakthroughs and headlines. Health isn't perfection. Freedom from fight is. Redefining success away from body ideals and toward actual physiological stability, reduced disease risk, and mental ease changes everything. That's what the book means by claiming you are enough, not as a comforting slogan, but as a biological truth. Your body doesn't demand perfection, it demands viability, and science is finally catching up to that. Key idea: real health isn't about chasing perfect numbers on a scale. It's about treating obesity as a chronic biological condition where medicine, environment, and behavior work together to support sustainable well-being. Key takeaway: progress in treating obesity must be measured by improvements in overall health outcomes and quality of life, not just pounds lost, nor moral victory. Favorite quote: freedom isn't a number you hit on the scale. It's the moment your biology stops making your life a battlefield. Conclusion. So here's where everything finally collapses into one truth. This was never a story about weight. It was a story about power. Power over the narrative. Power over whose suffering gets dismissed. Power over whether biology gets respected or punished. For decades, people were told to fight their bodies like enemies, to shrink themselves into obedience, to earn health through suffering. And when it didn't work, the blame was conveniently recycled back onto them. Try harder, be better, want it more, as if evolution could be shamed into submission. But the science didn't care, the data didn't care, and bodies didn't comply. What this book exposes, slowly, relentlessly, is that obesity was never a failure of character. It was a collision between ancient biology and a modern world that refuses to slow down, refuses to adapt, and profits from confusion. Hunger wasn't the villain. Food wasn't the villain. Even weight wasn't the villain. Ignorance was. Ignorance dressed up as advice. Ignorance disguised as motivation. Ignorance weaponized as morality. Once you understand that the brain defends fat, that hunger is a signal, not a sin, that food noise is neurological, not psychological, everything changes. The shame loses its grip. The endless restarts lose their meaning. The obsession with control gives way to something far more dangerous to the old system: clarity. And clarity is what terrifies people most. Because once you accept that obesity is a disease, the whole performance collapses. There's no moral high ground left, no superiority in being lucky with genetics, no pride in pretending discipline explains what biology actually governs. Just responsibility, shared responsibility, to treat a real condition with real tools. Medicine didn't save the day because people got weaker. It arrived because science finally got honest. And honesty is uncomfortable. It means accepting trade-offs. It means long-term treatment. It means admitting there is no finish line where you arrive fixed and perfect. But it also means something revolutionary. You don't have to hate yourself to get healthier. Health isn't punishment. Health isn't perfection. Health isn't a number that grants you worth. Health is when your brain stops screaming, when your body stops fighting you, when food becomes fuel instead of a battlefield. That's what enough really means. Not enough weight lost, not enough effort proven, enough peace to live. And if this book did anything right, it didn't promise miracles. It didn't sell fantasy. It handed you something far more valuable, a framework that respects your biology, your humanity, and your future. If you've ever felt trapped in your own body, if you've ever been told your suffering was your fault, if you've ever wondered why trying harder never made things easier, this book is an optional reading. It's overdue education. So if you got something out of this breakdown, don't stop here. Buy the book, read it slowly, let it challenge the stories you were taught about yourself. Because the most dangerous idea in this entire conversation isn't medication or science or weight loss. It's this: you were never broken. You were navigating a system that didn't understand you. And once you see that, you don't go back. Not to shame, not to silence, not to ignorance. That's the real freedom.